You're ready for introductions.
Just try to
Okay.
Suspense is dreadful, I hope.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, and psychons alike, direct from the Tiffany Theater, Mr. Nick Tate.
Wow. I didn't expect everybody would be sitting down and ready for me. So people would be milling around and saying, that can't be him. No. He hasn't got any hair. That's just before we start, I'd like to let you know that I've brought some friends with me. The little girl sitting down here in green is my daughter, Jessica.
Yeah.
Sitting next to Jessica is her boyfriend, Taylor Hutchinson. And Taylor Hutchinson's mummy, Chris Hutchinson. And a very dear friend of mine, Vince Glenner.
I am.
Vince is one of the big Hollywood wheeler-dealer guys. He runs a company called Astor Productions. And I work for him from time to time when he's kind enough to employ me. When I told him about, and Chris, when I told them about this convention, and they both said that they had loved Space 1999 from the past, and they would be dying to see what you people were like, what this sort of a deal was all about, Vince offered to drive me down, so I came down here with him. And here we are. So now I'm living here in the States, as you probably know. I came over in 1989. I came here for 3 weeks. Actually, I seriously did. I mean, I just came over here to, in fact, stay with Chris's mother. I've known the Hutchinsons for 20, 30 years. I don't know. That's so long. And Betty is her name. And she has a sister, Kay, who lives in Australia, who was my next door neighbor, and her daughter was my girlfriend when I was 16 years of age. It's been this incredible sort of relationship that's gone on for so long. In 1969 I came over and stayed with the Hutchinsons, and Chris was, I don't know.
Young.
Yeah. Young. She was a little girl, you know. And her sister Julie and their brother John. And it was wonderful in '69 to be here. I came here briefly on my way through from England, where I was living at the time, and I was coming to Australia to do a musical comedy called Canterbury Tales. And Canterbury Tales was on in New York at the time, and I was offered a week in New York to go and see the New York production because they wanted to do something in Australia like the New York production. It's funny how they changed productions. Canterbury Tales was an English musical comedy, and it had been on in the West End of London for about 3 years, very successfully. And it had this wonderful sort of Renaissance feel about it. And when they decided to extend it and make it more international, and they took it to Broadway, they put a lot more raunchy dance stuff into it. And they got a guy called Sammy Bays, who was Harold Robbins' assistant on Fiddler on the Roof, to choreograph all the dances. And he did that very successfully in New York. They liked it so much they then went back and revamped the show in London, and then decided that they wanted to do all that in Australia as well. And I was cast in London and taken to Australia, and on my way through I stopped in New York, and then I came down to see my friend Betty Hutchinson and her kids. And now they're kids, see? It all goes on. So I went back to Australia with that show, and I had no intention of being in Australia for longer than about 4 months. That's what I thought the show would run. But it ran for 18 months, and it was the most successful thing I've ever been in, and the most joyous experience of my life, because I think, you know, if you're an actor and you like music and you like drama and you like comedy, there is to be in the one venue, to be in the one thing
that does all of those things. A musical comedy is the most satisfying and exhilarating experience of an actor's life and career. And I was fortunate enough to be able to do that for 18 months. I was in the show for 418 performances. I mean, I'm doing a play now here in LA at the Tiffany Theater, and I've been doing it for about 2.5 months. And last night, one of our actors on stage, completely dried, just looked at me, and I thought, my God, you know, he's not going to say the next line. And I thought of something, and off we went again. You know, these are terrifying moments when they happen. And we've only been doing the show for 2 months. And we do 5 performances a week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and 2 on Sunday. And I know some of you are coming to see us tomorrow, which is wonderful. I love the show. But can you imagine, what, that's 2 months at times 5. So we're up around 40 performances in that area. But I had done 418 performances at Canterbury Tales. I mean, that's really something. And your mind starts to blank out after a while. You'd think the more you did it, the more you know it. But when another distraction comes along, I remember what happened. I was being put into a television series called Dynasty in Australia in 1970. 1969, actually, we started it, and then we went in 1970 with the second year. Of course, you have a series here called Dynasty. I mean, we English, we Australians call it Dynasty. And ours was a dynastical story about a great big newspaper conglomerate family called the Packers, who in fact do exist. Kerry Packer is the richest man in Australia today. He was one of the sons. His father was Frank Packer and ran the newspaper and the television industries and the magazines and all sorts of things. And my father was brought back from England to play him, and I played Kerry Packer. 2 other actors, Ron Graham and Kevin Miles, played our brothers, and or my brothers. And it was a very successful series that I did in Australia in those days. And that came out of my going back to Australia to do Canterbury Tales for a couple of months. The show was so successful, it ran and it ran and it ran, and whilst I was doing it, one late night an Australian director came to see me, and he said, gee, he said, I've got this wonderful series that your father would be fabulous in. Do you think we could get him back from England to do it? And I'd been talking to my father only about a week earlier on the telephone, who was saying how much he would love to come back to Australia, but nobody would ever ask him to come back, he thought. And here was this guy saying to me, he had this series, if you could only get my father to come back. So I quickly rang my father on the phone in England, and I said, I think you're about to get your wish. You know, you're going to be asked to come back, so play it tight, you know. So he managed to double his money and get his wish. It was wonderful. First time I ever worked with my dad, and it was great. I had an entire season doing that series with him in Australia. And as I said, you know, I went to Australia for a few months to do a musical comedy and wound up living back in Australia again. I hadn't, at that point in the 60s, I was living in England. I had a home, I had lots of friends, I considered my career and the future for myself in England, and I was cast in that production there. Went home, I thought, this is nice, just going home for a while, see everybody, wave, name up in lights, that'll be it. But I really fell in love with Australia. And I saw Australia more in that time than I had ever seen it before, because I was taken to every major capital. We were in Sydney, we were in Melbourne, Adelaide, Perth, Brisbane, in the most successful show in Australia. And so we were wined and dined by everybody, which became something of a problem when you're doing a matinee and then people want to take you out between the show, and then you come back for performance a lot of fun. You know, so I pretty soon learned that you just don't do that kind of thing. You know. I also remember the opening night in Adelaide, which was a complete disaster. We'd been doing the show for about a year, and we finally got to Adelaide, and we were given this huge civic. I'm bending over like a hunchback here. Excuse me, can I just? That's better. We were given this huge public reception in Adelaide by the Lord Mayor and everybody else. You'll get your turn in a minute, Taylor. We got Taylor. And of course, it was champagne and every known cocktail to man, and we had some very glamorous ladies in the show, and all the gentlemen dignitaries of Adelaide wanted to show off their best wines, because South Australia does have the best wines. And we all got absolutely pickled. I mean, to the point where hardly anybody could stand up, you know. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we had our opening night in Adelaide that night, you know. Countdown to 7 o'clock. 3 hours, and I am stone motherless, drunk. And was cold showers and hot showers and swimming pools. I managed to serve some of the people, some of the dancers, I mean, fell into the orchestra. That was a very funny opening night in Adelaide. But lessons to be learnt for young actors, you know, you don't drink when you're about to go on. I had an earlier lesson about drinking before I go on. Very early in my career, when I was about 21 years of age, I was working in a sort of semi-professional theatre in Sydney called the Independent Theatre, and there was a wonderful Australian author called Morris West, who's written Shoes of the Fisherman and all sorts of fabulous books, international author. He had a play, he didn't do many plays, but one play he wrote was called Daughter of Silence, which is actually a very good play. And I was doing nothing in it, you know, it was kind of like a walk-on, and my job was to move the scenery in between scenes and things, and say a couple of lines here and there. But I'd gone to a football game just prior to the evening performance, and I'd gone over to the pub with some guys, and I got smashed. And I came to the theatre at 6 o'clock at night, and the production wasn't on until 8 o'clock at night. And there was nobody in the theatre at all. So I'm wandering around the theatre, oh God, and I got underneath the theatre, and underneath the stage there were all these old curtains. And I thought, oh, this is nice. And I got into the curtains, and I fell asleep. And in the beginning of the play, it's set in Hamburg, and there's this girl comes into this little plaza where all these people are eating dinner and so on, and the set was a magnificent set, little tables and chairs and things, and there's little steps going up. This girl comes out, and all these local people stop and look at this girl, and she says she wants to know where the Lord Mayor's house is, and they say, oh yes, it's just over here, go knock on it. And all these people are looking at this very young, attractive girl, and she walks over, and she walks up the steps, and she says, I would like to see the burgomaster, please. And they say, the wife, she's eating on something. She says, yes. She said, Heinrich, lady come to see you. And he comes to the door and he says, yes. Oh, what can I do for you? And he's got on a great big bib and he's eating a chicken leg or something like that. And this gorgeous girl, she puts her hand into her handbag and she pulls out a pistol and she goes, bang, 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 bang. 6 shots, empties the gun into him and he falls dead. You know, it's like a New York movie, right? But I'd never seen a play like that. You know, everything is gentle and nice going on for the first 3 or 4 minutes, and then suddenly you are stunned. The audience just can't believe that they've seen this guy being shot point blank range, dead on the floor. And then it changes, all the tables are moved, and that's the point when, you know, the actors have to pick up the tables and move everything. Well, I'm asleep underneath the thing. Nobody knows I'm there. And then I bang, 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 bang. My God, the play, not only am I late, the play is already on and I'm not there, and who's going to carry my table? I mean, it was the most humiliating time of my life to have that happen to me. I didn't have to say anything, but I didn't get to carry my table. Somebody else did it, and I came rushing out on stage, and it had all been done, and I wasn't in this scene, and I had to go off the stage again, you know. And those are the things that I think have cemented in my mind that you do not drink and act. Lessons early on in life. I mean, in fact, I find these days that I can't drink and do anything. Now I've digressed a great deal. How did I get to America? Yes, I came to the Hutchinson's house. These things are always, what I'm trying to tell you is that, and this drives my wife crazy, there is no logical progression in our lives. She wakes up in the morning and says, what is he going to do today? You know, I mean, where do we go? It's not a 9-to-5 existence. She couldn't work out today where I was going, why I was coming down to see all you people. She said, Space 1999, that was when, you know, when we first met, you know. She said, are these people still wanting to do this? And I said, well, come and see. But, you know, Mum has to do things at home, so she allowed me to bring Jessie. So, I'm a vagabond. Actors are rogues and vagabonds. We wander the planet, you know. I came to Australia to do that series, to do that production of musical comedy for a few months, and I wound up reliving back in my country. As I told you, being wined and dined in every place that we went to, discovering Ayers Rock and Darwin and Perth, and seeing Australia in a way that only the most privileged people could see it. And then finding ultimately when I came out of that and I did the Dynasty series that I really wanted to do film. But there was no film in Australia back in the 70s. So I had to get back on my rogue and vagabond wagon and get myself back to England. And I got back to England in 1973, again not knowing what I was going to do. And within a matter of weeks, I met Sylvia Anderson. And I got into space 1999, which I have told the story before, and I don't know whether you want me to tell you the story all over again, how I got into it.
Tell us.
Listen, you're not supposed to be here. What do you mean to tell you? Oh, well, you know the story of how I got into space in 1999. What had happened was I had been doing various things in Australia. As I said, there was no film industry. It just wasn't, it didn't exist. I mean, pictures like Picnic at Hanging Rock and Breaker Morant and Mad Max and Crocodile Dundee, these were all to come into the future. Nothing was going on. I think Ted Kotcheff had come to Australia and made a film called Wake in Fright. Or did he make Walkabout?
Wake in Fright.
He made Wake in Fright, thank you, Vince. Right. And Stanley Kramer had come and made On the Beach. You know, about once every 5 years, some huge American or English director would arrive in Australia and make a big international film, and that was all that would happen, you know. The actors either worked in theatre, or they worked in some television, or they made tiny, tiny little sort of semi-amateur films. There wasn't a film industry, and so I had to get out of Australia and get back to England. I had made 1 or 2 pilots for different television series in Australia in the very early 70s after Dynasty, but nothing was going on. And one I did was a thing called The Chaser, which was a really great idea. It was directed and written by a man called Chris Kerry, who in fact is an American actor. And I see Chris from time to time now. We both share the same voiceover agency. I have a man called Steve Tisherman, who in fact my friend Vince Glenner introduced me to. And now Chris Kerry is with Tisherman also. And we see one another doing voices from time to time. Well, Chris had come to Australia because he'd heard a lot about the wonderful light and climate and everything else in Australia. And he wanted to make movies in Australia, but he found nobody was doing any. So he'd gone to the television channels to try and pitch various ideas. And they were going to do a comedy that he had set to do. And it was all written and everything was set to go. And he walked into all these corporate heads one day to set up this comedy series. And he sat down, and it's called a pitch, you know. You have to sit there and tell everybody what all the characters say and what they do. This is before you ever get to make it. They have to decide in that room whether you're going to get to make it or not. And so he was sitting there doing this, and he could see he was losing them. You know, they were starting to yawn and look at their watches and stuff. And finally they said, well, thank you very much, you know. Gee, we don't think we're quite ready. Comedy doesn't work in Australia. So he was up and he was walking out the door, and he realized that this was all over. And he said, and one of them said, gee, you know, if you had a detective series. And he said, I got a detective series. And they said, really? What is it? And he said, well, there's this guy, and he's a private investigator. And they said, yeah, we love it. Go on, what's he doing? He said, well, you know what the Rockford Files is?
Yeah.
They had made a film earlier, which I forget the name of, that James Garner had done. One film before he did the Rockford Files, which then became the Rockford Files. Does anybody remember the name of that?
Rockford PI?
I don't know. Whatever it was. Maybe you might be right. Chris Kerry had been in it. And suddenly faced with the door and walking out and the comedy thing out the window, he realized that he had to pitch. If he said what they wanted to hear, then maybe he could get something else going. And all of a sudden, he started a line. He started to tell them about this thing that he shot in America, but he said, yeah, and it's in Australia, and the guy is this Australian detective, and he's in King's Cross. And they said, yeah. Who's the actor? Who's the actor? We're going to get to do this. And he said, Nick Tate. And they said, yeah, it's great. He'd only ever met me once in a bar somewhere. And then he rings me up. He says, you've got to do this for me. So we did. We made this pilot, and surprisingly, it was really good. It was a really good idea about a private investigator back in the early 70s who lived in King's Cross, which is this very sleazy area of Sydney, which is kind of, it's Well, is there an equivalent here, really? Is there? I mean, some parts of Hollywood Boulevard late at night look like it, you know. There's the girls all standing on the corners and the nightclubs and the loud music and the bars and all that. And but the thing about my character was that he was not a James Bond. I mean, he'd come out to his car to chase somebody and find he had a flat tire. And he was always taking parking tickets off the window and screwing them up and throwing them away, you know. And he'd come back to his apartment and the sink was full of rubbish, and he was a slob, you know. And it was kind of you remember Columbo? Well, but this was before Columbo. We were going to do this in 1972, and in fact we did it. We made the first episode, and it was brilliant. Isn't the right word, but it was very, very good. It was new wave. It was about a young guy, and in those days I was a young guy, you know, and he had a lot going for it. And we made it, for the huge, astronomical sum of $27,000.
Wow.
Right? I mean, you couldn't even make 2 minutes here for $27,000 today. We made it for $27,000 in those days. And Channel 7 going, oh, I don't know, it's a lot of money. $27,000. How could we make these week after week? There was a company in Australia called Crawford's who made lots of very big successful television series, and they were turning out a series called Homicide, which they were presenting to Channel 7 every week at $25,000 an episode. It was a very, very successful series. So for a new series to come along costing another $2,000 a week, oh no, have to be $22,000 something. Anyway, as it transpired, they didn't make it. They went with another idea. Somebody came up starring Rod Mulliner called Ryan. And Ryan was a character who was like James Bond. He always won the girl. He won all the fights. He never had any flat tires, and he paid all his parking tickets, you know. And so that's the one they went with. And they made it for about $22,000 an episode, and it looked like it. So I was so disenchanted with all of that I hopped on an airplane and I flew back to England because I thought this is the best break I was ever going to have. And it didn't happen. So I went back to England, and I was moving around in London and meeting people and stuff, and I bumped into John McCallum, who had been shooting a television series in Australia called Boney, which was about a half-caste Australian Aboriginal detective. Wonderful character. Arthur Upfield wrote the books, and it was a very good series. And they wanted me, I played a couple of episodes in which I played his partner. It was sort of like the Dr. Watson to Sherlock Holmes. You're like, how did you do that? You know, well, I think it, oh, really? Oh, I'm wrong again. You know, that sort of a character. And I was having to play it to this Aboriginal detective. It was a wonderful idea, but I didn't want to stay doing that, so I went to England. Now, McCallum was in England at the time, pitching his series to Lou Grade. And Lou Grade was the great Lord Lou Grade, as he's known. I don't even know if he's still alive. Is he still alive? Probably still alive. Big movie mogul in England. He had just employed a man called Bruce Gingell as his right-hand man. Now, Bruce Gingell was one of the biggest television executives in Australian history, and he had been running Channel 7 at the time that I'd shot The Chaser. And I must say, to his credit, that he was one of the few people that was behind The Chaser happening, but it didn't, and so he lost out on that. Well, John McCallum told him that I was in London, and Gingell rang me up and said, I'm sorry we never made The Chaser, we really should have done it. He said, but I'm just about to do a television series with a family, Jerry and Silver Anderson, who make a television series called Thunderbirds, which is puppets about space, and he said they want to make one with real people. And he said, I think that you're a real person, and you should be in it. So he sent me down to meet the Andersons. And I went down and I met Sylvia, who I got on terribly well with. And they agreed that they would put me in this series as one of the astronauts that dies in the first episode, the very first episode of Space 1999. I was to be affected by the moon, by the dumping of the nuclear waste, and I had to have special contact lenses made, which was spiral, and it was really weird. I mean, I never worn contact lenses, but to wear contact lenses that were made that were pink with white spirals in them, they were unbelievable, very painful. And as it transpired, the first episode took 7 weeks to make, and I was in it, playing this character, and the director was a man called Lee Katzin. Lee J. Katzin. was it? Do we know his first initial, middle initial? I was wondering why he had that initial in there, but anyway, he did. It's a little American quirk you like to put these in. I mean, my name is Nicholas John Tate, and I guess I could be Nick J. Tate. We could all have our initial. Lee J. Katzen. Anyway, Lee and I hit it off the first day I met him. He was a really great guy. And we got to make this, the first episode of Space 1999, over a period of 7 weeks, which is unprecedented. I mean, that's like making a major movie. And they were doing all sorts of experimenting with what they were going to do and how they were going to set it up and what colors and so on, because Star Trek had been so successful, but it hadn't been on for 7 years. And they knew that if they did it right, they were going to capture all the Star Trek audiences and so on. At least they hoped. That's what they thought. And so the look was really important. We spent a lot of time trying to work out the look. And during that time, fortunately, I got to know Lee Katzen, and he hadn't shot anything on me at all, apart from some test stuff. And one day we got talking, and I had a book with me, which, you know, some actors do. They carry around their book with photographs and stuff in it, and it had all my experience from Australia with the things that I'd done, and including the chaser and all sorts of other things. And he said, this character dies next week. He said, yeah, we can't lose you. He said, I want you to do something else. He said, this is crazy. Well, I didn't know it at the time, but there was to have been a character called Alphonse Katani in the first episode. He was an Italian astronaut who gave Martin Landau's character a lot of problems because he was so aggressive, and he was the #1 astronaut, and Alphonse Katani was the one that was going to be one of the lead characters in the series, because there was Italian money in Space 1999 in the first series. I don't know if you know that, but in fact, I think 5 of the episodes of Space 1999 in the first series, in fact, did star Italian actors. You remember the one about Dragon's Domain?
Gianni Garco, of course.
Yeah. He was brought over. He was one of the Italian actors that they brought over. And I forget, there was a girl that came, and then they got into some problems because, although some of the Italian actors had starred in spaghetti westerns, they really didn't have very good English at the time. And it was, when you were shooting episodes, by that point, we'd got it down to shooting them in 10 days. Very hard to work with somebody who hardly speaks the language at all and get it done in 10 days. And so the Italian actor that they had, and I don't know to this day who he was, that was going to play Alphonse Katani, had come over and he'd met with the Andersons, and he'd met with Barbara Bain and Martin Landau. Barbara will be able to tell you more about it. But something went wrong. And either they fired him or he stormed out, or I don't know what happened. But suddenly the Andersons were in trouble because they were already 2 weeks into their scheduled shooting with tests and everything, and they'd lost one of their main characters. And Lee said to me, can you talk Italian? And I said, I didn't know anything about this. I said, what are you talking about? We were having lunch. He said, I want you to come in and do a reading as an Italian. I said, well, what about the character I'm playing? He said, don't worry about that, don't worry about it. He said, just come in and do an Italian. So he gave me some pages, which they call here sides. And I came in with my sides. And the only Italians that I could do were Australian greengrocers. How you going, mate? Half a pound of potatoes, and you know, good to see you again. You know, you getting any, all that kind of thing. Yeah, talking about that. So I'm coming in and I'm talking like this. You know, I'm Alphonse Katani. The Eagles are ready. They're going to fly to the moon, huh? So I'm talking like an Italian. Thank you very much. And I'm out the door. Right? And I'm about walking out the door, and Lee jumps up and he says, Nick, come back. Hold everything, hold everything. Jesus, he said, listen, this is an international series. He said, he doesn't have to be Italian. Hang on. He said, what else do you do? Do you do German? I said, yeah, you're going to do it German. It's going to do it German. I come back. So I'm saying, and I know it's, I'm going to do, we will ask the questions. Right? Standing there, I'm doing this thing straight off the top of my head. I'm doing this very bad German. And say, thank you very much. Thank you, Nick. And I'm about out the door again. Says, hey, wait a minute. He says, what else? This is an international series. He said, what else do you do? What else do you do? I said, I do Australian. He does Australian! And I said, no. Sylvia said, no, Australians, they sound just like Cockneys, you know, it's no good. Well, I saw red for the first time. I mean, I don't know if it means much to you, but as I explained to you, there was no Australian film industry. Anytime anybody ever made films and they had Australians in them, they always had English actors who were Cockneys doing Australians. I've just been up for an Australian play here, and a director came over and he said to me, I don't think we're going to use any Australian actors in this. He said, because the Australians would sound too much like Australians, and the American actors that were working alongside them would sound like drunken Cockney sailors. So he said, it's just not going to work. And as it transpired, that didn't work. And that's always been the thorn in our sides as Australians, that Americans and English actors find it very hard to do Australian accents. Meryl Streep was one of the few people I've ever seen pull it off. And she did it brilliantly well in Cry in the Dark, of which, of course, you probably know I worked with her. But she's rare because she does all sorts of brilliant accents, and there's not a lot of people that can handle this Australian thing. And here was Sylvia Anderson saying to me as I'm being pushed out the door, no, it sounds too much like Cockney. And I knew that it sounded to me nothing like Cockney, and I wanted to prove the point. I said, wait, what do you mean it sounds like Cockney? And she said, well, it does, you know, I mean, and we've got Cockneys in the show, Nick, and we don't need two Cockneys. I said, hang on a minute, Sylvia. I said, a Cockney is deferential, he touches his forelock, he opens the door for the governor. I mean, he knows his place. He's, you know, he's a little Cockney guy that works for the big man. An Australian calls a spade, he doesn't take shit from nobody, he doesn't open the door from anybody. An Australian's his own man. And Lee Katzin said, yeah, right on, that's the guy, that's the guy. And I got the role, okay? Because they could translate this bolshy, aggressive Italian astronaut into this cocky, aggressive Australian, and it worked, and I did it. So Alphonse Katani became Alan Carter in a breath. And as I've tried to explain to you earlier, you know, my life has never been set. I've never known where I was going. As I said, it drives my wife crazy. I never know what's happening from one day to the next. I couldn't tell you what I'm going to be doing in 2 weeks' time. I know what I'm doing tonight. I'm doing this play at the Tiffany, but that's rare to be able to tell you that. I go home and the phone rings and suddenly I'm in a movie. What happened with Hook, you know. A year ago, almost to the day, we'd been living here for 2 years, and we had come to the end. I had spent all my money. You live in the Palisades, you spend a lot of money, you know, crazy. I moved to the Palisades when I came here because I got a television series straight away. I was in...
Open House.
Thank you very much, Open House. Very memorable series. And, you know, I earned good money, and my wife said, if we're going to stay here, then we have to live like we live in Australia. I mean, I first had her and the kids, they came and visited me when I was over here in Westwood. And the first night she was with us in Westwood was suddenly, I swear to God, bang, 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 3 shots outside the window, screaming, sirens. And my wife said, what are we doing here? I don't want to be here. You know, so I said, well, what are we going to do? So she said, well, if we're going to find a house here, it can't be anywhere in the middle where all these people live. We've got to go and live somewhere where it's quiet like we live at home. Because we have this beautiful house, it sits on a beach, 17 miles up the coast in Sydney. We've got 3/4 of an acre of property and 2 dogs, and I want to go home. Jessie says to me every day she wants to go home, don't you? Yeah. And we will. We'll go home soon. But in the meantime, Hazel said to me, okay, well, I'll try and find something like Mona Vale. And she went around and looked around and eventually came up with a place in the Palisades, which was crazily expensive, but I was lucky at the time because I was doing a series, and it seemed like it wasn't a lot of money to me then, because when you do these series, they pay you so well. It's insane. The money that actors get for doing television series, not guest starring. You walk into a series and you guest star, you get really very small money. But the actors that are contracted to the series, the money they get is indecent. It really is. And it goes on and on and on. And if I'd stayed in an Open House for 5 years, I would never have had to have worked again in my life, because the money just would have been wonderful. And that doesn't mean to say because I stayed in it for 1 year that I don't have to work for the next 10 years of my life, because it sort of works like a mushroom. It starts like this and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And all these residual things and stuff build. I mean, I still get residual checks from Open House because it plays on cable. But I only did 22 episodes. Can you imagine when people... I mean, look at these people that are doing this Star Trek Next Generation. How many episodes have they made already?
Over 100.
Over 100, right? I've done one of those shows. One.
Yes. Yes.
I was in
Final mission.
Final mission. Thank God you're here. Yeah, you had the episode. As a matter of fact, I brought it with me today in case anybody wants to. If you've got a machine here and you can copy it, I have a very good copy, so you can copy it. I did one of those episodes, and I was paid a nice amount of money for that, just to do the one. I got a residual check in the post this week for $677 for the 6th play of that one episode. The 6th play of that one episode, and I was only in the one. So can you imagine people like Patrick and the rest of the guys who've been in over 100 times 6 repeats? My God, they must be multi-millionaires. It's disgusting, isn't it? Disgusting. I mean, it's the only reason I'm an actor, because I want to be disgusting and have all that money. And I don't know if it'll ever happen, but I keep trying, you see. I keep trying. It's like being in the lottery, you know. I keep buying lottery tickets, too.
I know, yeah.
You can't win the lottery if you don't buy the tickets. And I can't get into this industry if I don't stay here. That's what I have to tell my wife and my family and everybody else. This is what it's all about. I mean, the Paul Hogans of the world, the Brian Browns, the Mel Gibsons are very rare, charismatic individuals who managed to grab the world's attention from 10,000 miles away. But it's a very, very hard task to do. And so to come here and work in this environment and knock on all the doors like I do constantly, I'm up there batting with the best of them. You know, I go in now for meetings and I see faces that you would all know on television all the time, constantly sitting in the chairs alongside me, all learning their lines, you know. And then next, and you go in like, and you can hear the dentist drill. The guy comes out, God, you know, they come staring out of the room. So many times I've gone in and they've said how wonderful I was, and oh, you're magnificent, throw their arms around me, and I leave, and I never hear again. And other times I will go in and I'll do the read, and they say, yes, thank you very much. And I walk out and I think, oh God, they hated me. And I get home and my agent's ringing me and said, well, you got that one. It's just no knowing what it is. I think sometimes when you do these auditions for people and you meet them, that if you're really good, they think, we better not show him that we think he's really good because he'll ask too much money. So they say, yeah, okay, fine, okay, thanks, next, you know, and you leave and then they book you. And the other times when they're saying, oh, he was so wonderful, it's really what they're saying is, gee, you're not quite tall enough for this role, and we don't want to hurt you, and you're such a nice guy, and so we just tell you you're wonderful, and you can feel good and go home and not get the part, right? So I don't know why anybody ever wants to be an actor, you know. I guess you're going to see Barbara this afternoon, and she can tell you her reasons for being an actress. And as I think you all now know, I had a telephone discussion with a friend 2 days ago who said that he would try, and then again this morning he confirmed and said definitely that he is and will be with you tomorrow at 11 o'clock. And you know that friend is Martin Landau, and he will be with you between 11 and 12, maybe 12:30 tomorrow. So I hope that you're all going to be able to see him, because he's looking forward to seeing you. I see Martin from time to time. I've seen Barbara, I think, once this time since I've been here. It's a strange industry, you know. We get thrown into each other's arms and we work so closely together, like brothers and sisters, and like mothers and fathers and daughters and sons. And you have to respond in that way so intimately at times. Being thrown into bed with a girl you've never met in your life, you know, having intimate scenes within minutes of meeting each other. And or doing television series for a year where you play a husband and wife for years, and then when it's over, it's over. It's like the deprivation, the separation, the division, it's like a complete divorce. It is just extraordinary. I worked together with Martin and Barbara for 3 years on Space 1999. And some of us haven't seen, some people in that show I haven't seen from that day to this. Clifton Jones, who I liked so much in the first series, you know, I haven't seen Clifton since 1978, yeah, when we did the convention. And so on. Listen, I've digressed so much, I don't know where the heck I am. Somebody wants to put me back on the path. I was telling you that I came over here, yeah, I had done a television series in Australia called Dolphin Cove for CBS.
Yes.
We did 8 episodes, and it looked like we were going into a second series, and we were in hiatus. And I flew here. I rang up Chris's mum, Betty, and I rang her up and said, can I have a bed for a couple of weeks? I want to come over and meet the producers of Dolphin Cove because I've got some ideas. It was a very expensive series to make with dolphins and very logistically difficult. And I said I would, I had some ideas for them to make it cheaper and some great storylines and stuff, and so they agreed to meet with me. I faxed the head of network television at Paramount, John Pike. I didn't know him, I just faxed him and said, I'll be in town next Wednesday, I'll take you to lunch on Thursday, look forward to meeting you, goodbye. And that's what you can do with fax machines, you know, and I just flew straight over here, and I got here and I rang up his office and his secretary said, oh yes, Mr. Pike got your fax and he would love to meet you, but he's very busy. And I thought, oh, here we go, you know, I've come 10,000 miles and I'm going to get one of those. And the next thing was she said, but Mr. Symes, his second in charge, would love to have lunch with you tomorrow. So I got to meet John Symes and a fellow called Tom Mazza from Paramount. And they told me how much they loved Dolphin Cove and they really wanted it to go into a series, second year, but they thought that it wouldn't. And they were warning me about that and they said, but would you like to stay? And I said, well, I don't know, you know, I got a wife and 2 kids and big house back in Australia. I really would like this series to go ahead. They said, well, it may not, and if it doesn't, we have another idea for you. And that turned out to be Open House. And it wasn't that easy. I had to go through 5 auditions for Open House because they had an American actor, John Cipher, playing the role originally. And we made the change. I had my eyes closed. Do you want to do it again? I'll even smile for you. You ready? Okay. So I did, after 5 auditions on, oh yeah, again, you see now with Open House, the people had met because Dolphin Cove, I was an Australian in Australia playing an Australian. And with Open House, it was an American character, and there was no way any reason for it to be an Australian. He was the boss. And they said, but could you do it American? So, you know, me and a cockney Australian said, sure, I can do it American. I'm talking to people on this floor would stop doing this. But anyway, I'm talking away there and being American. They said, yeah, okay, fine. Not quite right. So what are we going to do? So they gave me a week to learn it and try and make it right. And I went in and I met the network people playing it American. And one of the rarest things happened when I finished. They all had a conference and they said, why don't you try it Australian? Which was kind of like going all full circle back to Space 1999 again. And so I did 2 readings. I did the first reading as an American and the second reading as an Australian. And they thought it was hysterical that this character should be an Australian. For some reason, you know, when you start talking like an Australian, everybody thinks it's funny. You know? So I did it. And I did that series. And I rang my wife. And I said, you know, I was here for 3 weeks. I said, well, I might be here for 5 years. And she said, what? I said, well, I've just got into a television series and I'm signed for 13 episodes. You better get on an airplane and bring the kids. She wouldn't. So she stayed home and I was here. And I was on Betty's sofa. In fact, a second spare bedroom actually for 9 weeks. And eventually Hazel did bring the kids over and I moved out of Betty's house and got an apartment in Westwood, which is where we heard the gunshots, and my wife said, no way, when's she going to live here in LA? So she went back to Australia the first time, came back again at Christmas, and it was then that she found the house in the Palisades and we moved into the Palisades. She had come for Christmas with the kids for 3 weeks and I said, don't go home. So you can imagine what it's like to somebody. You know, if any one of you here have come to this convention, is suddenly something happened to you today where you don't go back to where you've come from. And I know some of you have come thousands of miles to be here. But if it just transpired that somebody said to you, you're going to stay, you know, you're not going home. Can you imagine? You think, wait a minute, but I left, you know, I think the back door's open. Is the oven on? And you mean I'm not going home? And who's going to feed the dogs? And well, wait, my wife said, are you crazy? Look at the dogs at home, and so on. And the dogs are still at home 3 years later. You know, this is a really, yeah, I know. It's a weird existence. What am I going to do? I can bring the dogs over here like that. There's no problem with quarantine. But the minute I bring them, I have to be certain that I'm going to stay. And if I'm going to stay, that's fine, the dogs can stay. But if I decide 3 months after I brought the dogs, no, it didn't work, let's get back to Australia, the dogs have got to go through 10 months quarantine to get back into Australia. And I've already done it to Paddy when he was only about, how old was he? He was about 3. He had to spend He didn't spend 10 months then because I flew him and he had sorts of injections and stuff. From England is easier. But to here and back again, it's 10 months quarantine, and I just couldn't do it to him. He's 13 years of age. So I'm here. And who knows what the future will hold. I mean, as I told you, this time last year, I was at the end of it. We weren't going to do any more. We were going to go back to the dogs, and the telephone rang, and I had done an audition for the special of Dynasty. There was a 2-hour special. I'd done an audition to play a Swedish doctor. The guy always plays his characters to talk like this, you know. And I hadn't heard anything for about 4 weeks. And I'd also done an audition to play a Cockney pirate in Hook, and I hadn't heard anything for 4 weeks on that. I was out of here. I was out of here. Believe you me, I'd come to the end of my money. It was the end of the school time. Tom had finished his schooling here. They were thrilled. We're going back to Australia. And the phone rang, and my agent said, guess what? And I said, what? He said, they loved you at Dynasty. And I said, really? I did that audition 4 weeks ago. And he said, yep, they loved you. You've got the 2 hours. I said, oh, thank God. He said, but you can't do it. And I said, what do you mean I can't do it? He said, Steven Spielberg loves you too. You got Hook. I said, what? I hadn't worked for 5 months and suddenly I get 2 jobs on the same day. Right? This is this industry. Now the thing was, did I do the 2 episodes of Dynasty, or did I go down and do 1 scene on Hook for a guaranteed 3 weeks work with Steven Spielberg on Hook? Well, I made the decision to go and do Hook. I thought I'd much rather work with Steven Spielberg. Who knows, it may grow into something. It grew into 12 weeks. I worked on Hook for 12 weeks. Now, has anybody seen Hook? Okay. Some of my best friends have seen Hook. Nobody can recognize it. You did?
I recognized you right away. I knew it was your face. It was like, I
It was
know
my
this
face.
face.
It was the
I know this face.
the line at the game plank.
Yeah, but now, you see, you didn't spot me straight off. You know where I stop? You know when he says, you, and he points at a pirate, and he comes down to this guy and he says, you are going into the boo-boo box. And they take that pirate screaming and kicking to the boo-boo box. Well, I am the main guy that takes the guy and thrusts him into the boo-boo box and puts in the spiders and the snakes and the scorpions and everything. Now, from that moment on throughout the film, I am Dustin Hoffman's, Captain Hook's main protector. He has 2 guys. He's got a big black guy, Tony Burton, and me. I'm Noodler, with the big hat on, and the scraggy beard, and the long, blonde, filthy hair, and the staring eyes with the black makeup. Just, you know, my mother wouldn't have recognized me. In fact, she talked to me the other day from the big cloud place and said she didn't recognize. Fred Skepsey, who directed me in 2 movies, The Devil's Playground and Cry in the Dark. A very close friend of mine, Fred. He was in town about a couple of months ago and he said, I saw Hook. He said, you're not in it. What did you? I said, Fred, what are you talking about? He said, I looked everywhere for you. You're not in it. Terrific, terrific. I decided that I should not be so well disguised when I do things. Anyway, here I am. I'm still here. I'm still surviving. I'm doing Woman in Mind at the Tiffany Theater, and I went out for something yesterday. I'm going to tell you the name of it because my mother always said, don't talk about things because you never get them. So I spent my life never talking about things and still never getting them. So I'm going to talk about this one and maybe I get it. It's called The President's Child, and it is really topical because it's about a guy just like Clinton who has a woman come back into his life just at the minute that he's about to be made president and says, excuse me, this is your child. Oh, it's a great, great, great show. And I took a meeting on it yesterday and I went in. In fact, it's my 2nd meeting. It's a callback, so I'm close. I get so many callbacks. I'm king of the callbacks. And this producer jumped up and he said to me, oh, I saw Woman in Mind, you're wonderful. I said, yeah, tell me more. You know, so he spent 5 minutes telling the rest of the people how great I was. And then they said, you want to do the audition now? I said, no. I mean, I don't need to do it now, do I? I mean, he's just told you I'm great. But it was with an American accent, so I had to do it. And it worked really well, so that's, you mean, the phone can ring tomorrow, that can happen. Let's have throw it open to question time and see. I wanted to work out if my little tape recorder thing is still going around here. Yeah, I think it is, yeah. Okay, so does anybody want to ask me a question? Yes.
No, I just...
This lady in blue. What's your name?
Carla.
Carla. I remember you.
Yeah. Hi.
Good to see you.
It's nice to see you. Tell us about Woman in Mind. What's it about?
Woman in Mind is an Alan Ayckbourn play. Alan Ayckbourn is an English playwright who is the most prolific playwright in England. He's the Neil Simon of England. He has written, I think, 15, it might even be 17. He's written a lot of plays, very successful plays. Norman Conquests, How the Other Half Loves, Halfway Up the Tree. I mean, he's written so many fabulous comedies. This is a comedy, but as some of you will see tomorrow, it's a very dark comedy. It's a play about a woman who is going mad. She's locked in a loveless marriage. She's been married for 22 years to an English vicar who is very boring, very precise, very dull individual, played by an incredibly dull and bad actor. Me. And I'm sort of frankly like that, and can't understand why she doesn't love him anymore, and why she just doesn't get on in. I had my eyes closed. And so what she does is, in the beginning of the play, we see her lying on the stage, knocked out. She's trod on a garden rake, and the rake knocks her out. And so now she starts fantasizing. And the play is about her fantasy and reality. She goes in and out of it throughout the 2 acts. And she fantasizes a wonderful, wonderful family who play tennis and drink champagne and tell funny jokes, and everybody is beautiful and they love her, and she lives in this wonderful estate with gardens and tennis courts and swimming pools. And then she keeps snapping back to this horrible little vicarage that she lives in with this boring man and this son that doesn't understand her, and life is awful. And it's a very black, dark comedy that bounces backwards and forwards between reality and fantasy. And Sandra came to see it the other day, and Rosie Badgett came to see it, and it's fun, isn't it? Yeah, because it's a dark comedy. I think you may cry too. Well, I don't know about cry, but I think you'll get a lump in your throat a couple of times because it's sad. I mean, she goes mad. She really does. And this is the genius of Ayckbourn, who can tell a story so sadly but yet make you laugh. And it's a sellout. You can't get in, sadly. It's all booked out. And Helen is booked to fly back to England early in August to do a film. So it will end, unless they get another actress to take over, but I don't think I want to go with anybody else. I've had 2 months, in fact I've had 3 months on it, counting rehearsals. It's been very successful. We've had wonderful reviews, but I must tell you one thing, because some of you probably saw it. The LA Times was the only review we had that was slightly bad. The review wasn't all that bad about the play, but then they came to me and they said, and Nick Tate can't do an English accent. There are 5 Americans in the play who all have very good English accents of varying degrees, going between being reasonably good to being very good. And, you know, I lived in England for 18 years, and if I can't do an English accent, then there's something wrong with the state of Maffican. But I think the woman was taking drugs or something at the time when she wrote this review. Or maybe she doesn't like boring vicars. Who knows? So she gave me a bad time, but don't let that stop you. It's a wonderful play, and everybody, including myself, is very good in it. Now, what would you like to know? You don't want to know anything?
My first time was Space 1999 car.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of like, okay, Nick Tate, yes, this is nice, I'm happy.
Good, I'm thrilled for you. I mean, I think the first time I went to anything like a convention was in 1976. I was invited to a Star Trek convention. Was anybody there? Yeah, it was extraordinary because at that particular point in time, only Trekkies were invited. I mean, people that were involved with Star Trek. And this was a really big breakthrough to have anybody from anything outside of it be invited. And I was the first person ever to be invited to one of those. And the first person out of the Space 1999 thing, which was nice for me, because Alan Carter was fairly popular. And I went in '76 over there, and I don't know, it was a huge hotel, and there must have been 500-600 people. It was big. I mean, this is lovely, but it's tiny, and I'm very pleased that, you know, that it's intimate and we can be this close together. But that other thing was very scary. I mean, God, it seemed like there were thousands of people. As many people are sitting here now met me at the airport when I arrived. You know, they all came to the airport and they all had aerials and things sticking out. And their faces were painted blue and they were all wearing costumes and stuff like that. You know, it was incredible. Even more incredible than you're dressed. And you're pretty incredible. Do you want to ask me something? No. No? Come on, somebody.
No,
There's a guy back there.
This is also my first space convention. I'm thrilled to be in the same room with you.
What's your name?
Brian.
Brian. Hi, Brian.
I was curious, how did you find yourself up for the role in Star Trek The Next Generation?
Star Trek The Next Generation. I went in, as I do as an actor, on meetings for shows. I had met June Lowry, who was casting Star Trek. Oh, I got to change this tape here. Because I have a fan club in England called, used to be called the British Nick Tate Fan Club. You remember. And it's called, it's now called the, let's get this closed and get going here because, oh, no, that's not. I'm making this tape for Eileen and Phil, Eileen Skidmore and Phil Proctor, who run the International Nick Tate Fan Club, which is in England. And I'm a bit naughty. I hardly ever contact them. And they can hear, I'm wrapping myself over the knuckles here, girls, you know, because they never hear anything, you know. I mean, where they get their information about me, I don't know, but it's wonderful people like Ellie here who correspond with them. At one particular point last year, I think the membership was still up around the 300 mark, and so there's quite a few people that write backwards and forwards. I mean, you probably will write to them about your experiences here whenever anybody from the club meets me or sees anything that I've done on film or television or wherever. They write to the club, and so they get lots of information that way. In fact, I went and saw them once, and they had a dossier on me that I would give, you know, my eye teeth for. There were photographs and articles about me that I had never seen, and they were wonderful, and I would love to have them, you know. And I'm only thrilled and proud that these girls should have wanted to carry it on. I thought it would all stop after about 6 weeks after the series finished. And I'm staggered that what is 1992, that there is still a fan club that is carrying on doing this for me, and or even wanting to, you know. But they used to do monthly news magazines, and obviously that became too difficult. They're down to quarterlies, I think. Quarterlies. They went to bi-monthly, now they're down to quarterlies, but they have doggedly gone on with it, and magnificently, because they're very interesting pieces that they put together. And what I do now is they ring me, or I ring them, or I'll call back 2 or 3 times a year, and I'll talk on the phone to them for about an hour, and it's questions and answers, you know. So we get lots of stuff about the career and where we're going and so on. And every now and again I'll sit down and I'll write them a long letter. Or I'll send them a tape, and that's exactly what will happen here. They'll get this tape, and so they'll be right up on what we've been talking about, and they'll want to know your questions too. So it's kind of surprising that this is the first Space 1999 convention you've ever been to, because it may well be the last too. Now, who knows? I mean, every convention I've ever been to, people have said much the same way. You know, this could be the last, and then now it's 1992, and we're still doing it. So I'm pleased you're here, Brian.
I was wondering if it would be possible for, we have people here from literally all over the world.
Yeah.
Stand up and introduce themselves.
Yes, please. The people that.
I got pen already.
Well, do you want to do that?
Yeah, that would be really nice if everybody did say where they're from. Let's start with Ellie. Where are you from?
Canada.
You're from Canada, and have you come here specially from Canada? Ellie, say your name, Ellie.
And Clausen.
Clausen. I've got very bad eyes. Ellie Clausen from Canada.
Calgary too.
And you've come down here specially for the convention. That's wonderful. Now, where are you? This is
Eileen.
Eileen
Green.
Green?
New Zealand.
From New Zealand. Have you come from New Zealand for this?
Yes.
Oh, I am just knocked out that you people. This is incredible. Eileen Green from New Zealand. Now, let's go through everybody's names first, and then if we could talk a bit more about the people.
Your name?
Now,
Deborah Allardyce.
Deborah Allardyce. See, you're signs are shining and I can't read them from the lights. So you have to tell me what you're from the USA. Whereabouts in the USA?
Seattle.
From Seattle.
Just flew down for this.
You flew down specially for this.
Yes.
Deborah Allardyce. That's incredible. Thank you. Debbie
Stoy.
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 From
South
what?
Carolina.
From South Carolina, and you have flown in for this?
Mm-hmm.
That's fabulous. Gee. And Ken
Cartwright.
Ken Cartwright.
From San Diego, and I just drive all the way up here.
I drove all the way from the Palisades, mate. Steve Bridges.
Bridges, and I drove with him.
And you drove with him. Was it hell? Good drive,
I'm
huh?
not doing it right.
Yeah, great.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah, quick. Yeah.
Has that helped your career a lot? Has it been a big influence on your career? Has it helped out?
Well,
the show?
you know, if I hadn't done Space 1999, I guess, I don't know, because, yeah, I'm here and I'm working, and I think that some of the times when I meet people and I go in for interviews, some of them will say, I went for a commercial the other day, and the guy said, "Oh, Lemon Carter, you know, I can't believe this." I didn't get the job, so that people can even recognize me. I don't really think Space 1999 has helped my career very much. I think, I mean, I'd probably be, you know, something of a big star if it had. I think that if I had stayed here, if I'd come here then, when Space 1999 was on, and capitalized on the momentum that was happening. During those conventions, I came over a couple of times, and I had some agencies and so on want to represent me, and I should have stayed, but I didn't. I went back to England, I got married. I thought my career in England was more important than I stayed there. I've had a very good career, as you can see, you know, and I've had a very good life, and I've earned a very good living. But compared to what you talk about, the success of American stars, the huge amounts of money and the great sort of stardom that they've enjoyed. No, my career has never been anything like that, and Space 1999 hasn't given me that. But it's given me a lot of personal satisfaction. And I mean, to come and meet people like you, genuinely, I do enjoy this very much, and the letters that I've had from people about the series and the meetings that I've had with people throughout the years, people that have come backstage in theaters and wherever I meet people in public places that have remembered Space 1999, yes, it has been very positive for me, but I don't think it's kind of launched my career.
I'm Cecil Trevathan, and I came up with the demo.
Cecil Trevathan. And you came with these guys from San Diego. Okay, and you are? Michelle Reaver. From where?
Boston.
From Boston. And did you come here from Boston especially? That is wonderful. Nice to see you. And there's a guy with an Aussie hat on. What's your name?
Hugh Gregory. I'm a member of Equity from Melbourne and an actor member in Canada. But in Australia, I have a Canadian accent. In Canada, I have an Australian accent. No bastard will give me a fair go.
No bastard will give Hugh Gregory a fair go.
Except the young lady I met at a con 8 weeks ago. We've been dating steadily. She found me sound asleep in the TV room trying to watch Thunderbirds.
That's
how
wonderful.
I came here was her.
That's fabulous. That's wonderful. Great.
By the way, my question is, who do you barrack for?
I beg your pardon, who do I barrack for?
Who do you barrack for on the footy?
Well, I used to like Collingwood, but you know, I'm not really a Melbourne man, I'm a Sydney man, and so I then started barracking for the Swans. The rest of you Americans are sitting here thinking, what are they talking about?
I drove a cab when I wasn't acting, but I found it safe to barrack for St. Hill because they were always bottom of the ladder. You never had any argument with passengers of barrack for Hawthorne.
Now, doesn't John Blackwood, Blackman, doesn't he follow St Kilda? He does, yes.
Did you get to do any arguments in any public?
Yeah. Nice to meet you, Hugh, from Australia. No worries, mate. Sandra Sprecher is sitting over there, and we know Sandra. She's from Canada, but lives here now, right? In El